Hello and welcome to the Just for Gamers video game podcast. Episode 191, Alex's Xbox Loving. Hello and welcome to the JfG podcast. This is episode 191. My name is Alex, and I'm not joined by my good friend Ash. You may remember, buddies, we mentioned last week that Ash was very much hoping that he'd be moving into his new place this week and getting out of the rental that he's been in for the last few months. And that is the case. So, excellent news there, and congratulations to Ash on successfully buying a house at the second time of trying, through no fault of his own the first time round. Either way, as I understand it, Ash is basically just painting everything at this moment in time, and that is his life now. And as such, he's not going to be joining me this evening. On the plus side, buddies, I also was mentioning over the last couple of weeks how I was hoping I'd be able to snap up some sort of cheeky Xbox One S deal on Black Friday with my nefarious gift vouchers that I received for a competition I didn't enter before I left my terrible job. And that is exactly what happened, buddies. That thing went down to around 160, 170 pounds in the UK with various different bundles. I cashed in my vouchers, picked up an Xbox One. As such, I'm not going to go on about anything that I've been up to. It isn't very interesting anyway. Although I did make a solo visit to the pub this week, which could well mean the beginning of the end for my body and my mind, if that becomes a habitual thing. I'm also out to see a comedian called Bob Mills at the Tunbridge Wells Hotel this evening, which is a fucking odd thing to be doing, buddies. But as Ash berated me about last week, stop talking about stuff you're gonna do, buddy, just because you didn't do enough fucking stuff this week. That's not quite how he phrased it, but he was right. I was cheating. Anyway, lots and lots of games for me to talk about. You'll either find that interesting or you won't, as I mentioned in the intro. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. The topic of this week's podcast is video games, so I'm kind of on brand in that respect. And, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about loads and loads of fucking games. I'm going to start this week, though, with the news, because I want to get it out of the way. There's not a great deal of it. It's not going to be a conventional show, as you'd expect. I have no idea how long it's going to be, so that's fine as well. True JfG styles here. So, let's start with the news, buddies. And now it's time for the news. The news. The fucking news. Alright. It's not the same, is it? It's just not the same. Number one in the news. Number one. An announcement's been made about the amount of money that Shenmue 3 has made through crowdfunding. The crowdfunding is now over, and the game made $7.1 million, which is a lot. So $7,179,510 from 81,087 backers. Which is crazy. That's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money for the development of a AAA video game. Although there's this weird thing going on with Sony, isn't there, that they announced at E3, in that they would be part funding the project or helping in some way. It wasn't really explained, and I don't know how many people really cared. it seems crazy to me that they're making this. There's a fair old whack of footage that you can find now if you head to YouTube and on the actual crowdfunding page that they were using. There's quite a few sort of proof of concept videos, bits and pieces. I mean, this game's supposed to be coming out in April next year, so it's got to be a hell of a long way along. And I've been pretty unimpressed by what I've seen of it so far. It looks like an old game reskinned rather than a new game, and that's not really what should be the case, is it? I mean, this is a new game. They've made this from scratch, so if it looks old, it's because the people designing it haven't necessarily moved forward with the times, or the budget isn't there to get the right people on board. So yeah, I don't know. It's not something that I find very interesting. I very much enjoyed the first Shenmue, but we've come a long way since then. I'm not sure it's especially relevant anymore. Obviously, we'll give it a chance, but yeah, not for me. Either way, yeah, just over 7 million. Sony chucks some money in as well. We're certainly going to get something interesting. And yeah, I think 29th of April is the alleged release date of that title. So yeah, we will move on to number 2. This is going to be a whole lot of stuff about Fallout. I mean, if you follow video game news then on a daily basis, then you may well be sick of this by now. But for those of us who don't, there's obviously been a lot of backlash from Fallout 76. This is a game that has reviewed horribly, is just utterly riddled with bugs and problems, and even taking all of that to one side, the actual premise of the game appears to be kind of flawed as well. I think that's probably being generous. Either way, we've got some pieces of news from Bethesda and from Fallout this week, so I'll just rattle through them quickly. Firstly, Bethesda's refund policy is in the news. Some PC players raised tickets requesting a refund for their digital copies of Fallout 76, and to their surprise and everyone else on the internet, were quickly issued refunds, which is kind of unprecedented, especially through just a standard sort of ticketing system. You'd expect to at least have to jump through more hoops, but more than that, the terms of service from Bethesda suggests that digital buyers aren't entitled to a refund at all. So as the buzz began to grow about this, refunds were suddenly denied and replaced with a stock explanation that, and I quote, "Customers who have downloaded the game are not entitled to a refund." I don't know how they get away with that, if I'm honest. It's, again, another example of the video game industry. Seems not right and proper. I just don't think that many industries on Earth would get away with some of the shit they get away with. The idea that you buy a product, you're desperately unhappy with it, it doesn't do what you think it should do, and you try and get your money back as a consumer and you're denied. You haven't even got the rights to a refund. That seems incredible to me. But I suppose if you're gonna buy it and the terms are there, then what can you do? Either way, a law firm who likes free publicity in the States, Miglaccio and Rathod LLP, claim that they will be looking into it. But they often say this seems to be a law firm with a penchant for video games, and anytime there's any sort of intriguing controversy in the games industry, these guys step up with some blog posts and free publicity for themselves, saying that they're going to look into things and investigate. It's just kind of their thing, it seems. So that's the first bit. Some people got refunds. Now no one's getting refunds, and no one really knows what's going on there. It would be par for the course if no one received any refunds, but the fact that some people were seems very odd. They haven't really got their house in order. And there's plenty more examples of that coming up in my next little bit here, buddies. So, meanwhile, a number of customers who bought the $200 Fallout 76 Ultimate Edition, which came with, among other things, the Fallout helmet, the full-blown helmet, are complaining that their pack was supposed to come with a rather nice-looking canvas bag. This is pictured in all the promo material, and until yesterday it was still on Bethesda's own website in photos. And it actually came with a horribly thin plasticky bag instead, like one of these sort of dust-proof bags that you maybe put sort of old shoes in a cupboard or something. Really horrible looking thing. And obviously we're talking about bags here, and so like really who gives a fuck? But at the same time, if you are someone who likes to collect video game memorabilia, and if you have forked out $200 for a product, you would probably expect to get everything that was listed with that product. Anyway, this is another thing that was handled terribly by Bethesda. The original response to a complaint, which was posted on Reddit shortly afterwards, was that the original bag was a media prototype and they found it was too expensive to make in any great quantity, followed by this official quote from a Bethesda representative: "We aren't planning on doing anything about it." So, sure. Later, another official response from Bethesda saying that the previous response was from a temp and that their message was wrong and did not represent Bethesda properly, which, fuck me, man. Honestly, like, such a massive organisation. But then, you know, they're kind of responding to queries and requests in a manner conducive with their game design. Finally, after lots of moaning and so on, they released a statement saying that the materials were unavailable, and they asked all special edition customers to get in touch so they could credit them 500 atoms. Now, here we are again, buddies. The atoms, they are the microtransaction secondary currency for this AAA $60 game. Because, of course, you can spend £12.99 on a fireman's outfit, for example. So this is 500 atoms, which cost £3.99 on the Fallout 76 store. So this is Bethesda refunding a missing product from your $200 Ultimate Edition with digital currency. It costs them nothing to give to you. And despite the fact it doesn't cost them anything to give you digital currency, they're only going to give you $3.99. Another funny thing pointed out here was that the canvas bag is modelled on a particular character model, and you can only buy that character model with 700 atoms on the store. So their refund doesn't even earn you the money required to buy the character whose bag you were after in the first place. It's all bollocks, obviously, but this is essentially an organisation ripping off their customers, I would say. And yeah, I mean, from all the stories that we've heard recently, I don't know if anyone is especially surprised by that. Elsewhere, actually returning to the game itself rather than bags, a character, a customer who had ranked up to the level cap. This is a player who'd ranked up all the way. They had some really weird glitching out problems. Then they were disconnected from the servers, and now they cannot die. They are a god. They are the one. They are the Neo of Fallout 76. This guy can't die. It doesn't matter what he does. There's various amusing images of him being attacked by dozens of mobs at once, standing in a volcano, standing at the epicenter of a nuclear blast. He can't die, buddies, and that's causing him a whole load of problems because it's preventing him from doing quests or playing properly. The game seems to see him at 0 HP, so he is aggroed, like he is attacked, but it does nothing for him to be attacked. He can't he can't do anything. It's like he's in sort of debug mode. He's contacted Bethesda repeatedly, had a ticket on with them for 2 or 3 weeks now. They've come to the conclusion that they can't fix it, which seems again about right. So yeah, they're unable to fix his character for him, and yeah, he's basically just going to have to start again or uninstall the game, which is probably what I would do. Finally, Bethesda has apologised to its community for the radio silence since the launch of the game, and has been outlining future patches and content patches to address the many issues the game has. So, you release the game broken, get everyone on board by coupling the beta with a mandatory pre-order, fix nothing between the beta and the pre-order, and then spend the next year, 18 months changing and fixing it. This is games in 2018, buddies, and I don't think anything's going to change anytime soon. There's just as many people defending the company, not just the game, but Bethesda themselves. Fanboys defending this company. I don't really understand the world anymore. And I guess I don't really have to, except to occasionally report nonsense to you guys. So we'll leave it at that. That's your Bethesda 10 minutes there, buddies. And they're just a beautiful gift that keeps on giving, as far as I'm concerned. We move on. Couple more things. The US Federal Trade Commission has joined the loot box party. They will be investigating loot boxes in video and mobile games. FTC Chairman Joseph Simons agreed that loot boxes would be investigated at the request of Senator Maggie Hassan. Hassan was also responsible for making sure all games that included microtransactions had stickers on them warning people that they did, which was met with quite a lot of derision. A lot of people kind of saying, well, that's nothing really, but I suppose this is a process, and if you're in government, then you need to do this properly. It was a start, and it looks like she always had more of a plan going forward. This is a quote from Hassan. Loot boxes are now endemic in the video game industry and are present in everything from casual smartphone games to the newest high-budget releases. Loot boxes will represent a $50 billion industry by the year 2022. The findings she quoted there in a report from Juniper Research earlier in the year. It's time for the FTC to investigate these mechanisms to ensure that children are being adequately protected and to educate parents about potential addiction and other negative impacts of these games. Simons agreed they needed to be investigated, and the FTC is beginning an investigation now. So this is what happens when the games industry can't regulate itself. People step in to regulate it, and we'll follow this one very, very cautiously. Some optimism. I don't know. It's just bizarre. It's a very strange time in which we live, buddies. But there we are. So yeah, I think that's it from me, actually. I think that's all I've got. I just wanted to give you some news, buddies. I know some of you get all of your video game news for the week from us, so thought I'd include it. And we will now move on.
Let's take a look at some games coming out this week. Probably filled with microtransactions, loot crates and pay-to-win mechanics. Because fuck you all. Fuck you all. Fuck you all. Fuck you all. Buy our shit.
So now let's run through the things that are going to be out this week, buddies, because I feel I'm going to waffle on somewhat after this, so I think I'll get the house in order first. We've firstly got our Games with Gold and our PS Plus lineups for December. Firstly, Xbox Games with Gold, Games for Gold. We've got Qube 2. We recently had Qube Director's Cut on PS Plus, which I found briefly interesting and eventually boring. It's a puzzle game with various... It kept ramping up the mechanics. That was kind of what annoyed me, and a lot of the puzzles, whilst clever, I didn't find much fun. So, that's kind of integral, isn't it? Maybe this will be better. It's the sequel. I am now a Xbox Live Gold member, so I will be able to test out Xbox games as well as PlayStation games going forward, which I'm sure you're all delighted about. I test them, buddies, so you don't have to play them, that is, a lot of the time. Never Alone, though, is the second Xbox One title, and is a very good game. It's a fairly early Unity engine, so very tiny bit clunky, but a very interesting game, really rich lore. It's sort of set in the snow, a sort of 2.5D side-scroller, centering around Alaskan cultures and tradition, and I really enjoyed it. I played through it a couple of years ago, and it's well worth a look if you're on Xbox. It's good fun. It's probably, I don't know, a sort of 4 or 5 hour campaign. They released a DLC pack for it, which was very good as well. But yeah, well worth a look, that. In terms of Xbox 360 games, we've got Dragon Age 2, which is pretty old now, but then we're talking 360 in general, aren't we? And a lot of the time these double as backwards compatibility announcements from Microsoft. And the original Xbox game Mercenaries, which was really good, and a lot of people have wanted that for ages. A lot of people have been campaigning for that to become backwards compatible. So I think, despite the fact that that's a game from, fuck knows, I don't know, 2003 or something, a lot of people are pretty excited about that, and maybe you should be as well, buddies. I'll certainly be giving it a go when it hits the service. And those games will launch stunted across the month of December, so you can get stuck into those at various points in the coming weeks if you're on Xbox. Meanwhile, on PlayStation Plus, we have Soma, which is a first-person sort of walking sim horror game, but it's a bit more interesting than that. It's set beneath the ocean, and it's something that myself and Ash played through on SharePlay when SharePlay was first a thing. And despite a couple of annoying moments, I always find it very annoying when there are sections in these sort of horror first-person games where you're confronted with an enemy that you just have to run away from and hide from. Whilst I know that they're trying to build an atmosphere, it's just very annoying, the idea of a game where I'm put in a situation where an enemy is going to be placed in front of me and then I have to backtrack and fucking hide from it, maybe kite it round somewhere, or I don't know. It's just annoying. Isn't it annoying? Do people find that annoying? I fucking do. Elsewhere, what I should say, by the way, is Soma's a really cool game overall. It had its problems, but all in all, the mood it created was excellent, and it's well worth a playthrough. Again, a sort of 6 to 8 hour campaign, something like that, and we really enjoyed ourselves. There were just a couple of niggles. The second one, Onrush. Wow. So, obviously, this is probably one of the newest games to come to PS Plus, as in since its launch, other than games that obviously launched on the service. This is only a few months old, this game, and bombed horribly. We played the beta for it, and I quite enjoyed it. Everyone else really didn't. It's not really a racing game in the traditional sense, in that at the time of launch, it didn't have any races that involved you coming first. It wasn't really that sort of game. It was more of a kind of point scoring MOBA-esque kind of thing, where you just tried to take out lots of enemies, get lots of power-ups and so on. And I think there's probably something really good there, but it just very hard sell, sold very poorly. This is from the Evolution guys after Cody's picked them up. That team has essentially been disbanded now, following how miserably this game did. I don't think it even charted, which you don't have to sell many to get 10th in the charts physically. Dropped out of view very, very quickly indeed. Has already been added to Xbox Game Pass and now is being given away on PS Plus. So, people who did buy it seemed to very much enjoy it. Or maybe they were feeling a bit sorry for themselves after forking out. You never really can tell. I thought there was something there. I'll certainly be testing it out. I've actually got it installed on the Xbox, so I've already had the opportunity, but I understand that the performance is much better on the PlayStation with this game, and most of them, I think it's fair to say. So, yeah, Soma and Onrush are your PS4 titles. We've also got Iconoclasts, which is a cross-platform game. Kind of old school shoot 'em uppy 2D jobby. We got Steriden as well, and Papers, Please as your cross-play titles, Vita as well. Papers, Please was a bit of a media darling a few years ago. Involves you working on a border, letting certain people in from, I think it was Aristotka, if my memory serves me right. And it involved you checking passports, which doesn't sound fun, but it was done in a very interesting way with a sort of backstory, you trying to stay afloat and not starve to death, and your family not starve to death. Very bleak, but a clever little indie game and probably worth a look. So there you go. In terms of the two lineups, I think that the fact that you've got Onrush in there probably makes it look a little bit better value-wise on PS Plus. I mean, Cube 2, Never Alone, Dragon Age 2 and Mercenaries, we're talking maybe £5 worth of value there on the Xbox, whereas Soma is probably sort of 15 quid game, Onrush 25-30 quid game. So in terms of raw financial value, you probably would side with Sony on this one, but at the same time, there's not a lot in it, I don't think, and value isn't everything, perceived value at least. Anyway, those are your games with gold and your PS Plus, and there are also some other games out this week proper, and they are Just Cause 4. I don't know if anyone's seen very much about Just Cause 4. Square have gone pretty hard on promo on YouTube. They've been giving a lot of codes away, lots and lots of videos popping up, and it seems to me that the focus with all of this has been on performance. Now, Just Cause 3, sure had a lot of interesting things in there, but I found it borderline unplayable because the performance issues were so severe that within the first half an hour of playing that, they gave that away on PS Plus, and I found the game dropping sort of sub 10 frames at times. It was a miserable experience and kind of ruined the supposedly carefree fun of running around an island and tethering shit together and so on. So yeah, I've actually seen a lot of videos of Just Cause 4, and it seems like a lot of their blurb has been about this engine change that they've made. They've basically kind of revamped everything, and you can tell immediately that this is a streamlined product. This is a game that runs properly. We haven't seen a great deal from the console builds just yet. We've been promised great optimization there, but certainly the PC build it's like a night and day compared to the previous installment, and really they should be able to. I mean, I know that this is a heavily physics-based game, and that is incredibly taxing on hardware, but at the same time, it's a completely offline game, and very cartoony kind of graphics, which kind of promotes lower texture quality. Like, you can kind of get away with that a little bit more. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. Certainly one to wait until you've seen a review on your platform of choice, I would say, based on the performance on the Xbox and the PlayStation of the previous installment. But pretty hopeful that actually this one's going to deliver what the last game kind of tried to, but didn't quite succeed with its technical limitations. So lots of additions here. You can kind of put thrusters on anything as well as tethering. You can kind of Fulton things on this as well, kind of MGS style, with you can strap balloons to anything. I saw some videos earlier of someone turning a yacht into an airship and then putting thrusters on the back. Really fun stuff. Whether that would hold your attention in the long term, I mean, there is a story there of sorts, usually, with Just Cause. I kind of found that in a sort of goat simulator kind of way, I can only really fuck about in a game world for so long before I kind of feel like it's a bit pointless. But then that kind of leans into what we were talking about last week, buddies, in terms of how to gauge fun and what's a good video game. Do you need achievements and incentives and so on, or can you just play it and fucking enjoy it? So, looks interesting. Meanwhile, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate coming to Switch. Big deal, that big AAA one lead up to Christmas. That's kind of, they're pegging their hopes for the sort of holiday season on this. Obviously a massive popular franchise full of lovable characters and so on. And that's out on the 7th of December. And then we also have Persona 3 Dancing in the Moonlight on PS4 and Vita, and Persona 5 Dancing in the Starlight on PS4 and Vita, both coming out on the 4th of December. And these Persona dancing games are surprisingly popular in the West as well as in Japan. So obviously anyone still tinkering away on a Vita at this point is going to be pretty pleased to see that. And there are a few Vita games popping up in the coming weeks, so that's nice, considering that they've stopped making them and basically put that thing out to pasture long ago. I still maintain that it's a fantastic machine, and was pretty amazed by it when it first launched. But hey, it wasn't to be. Sony decided that, and there we are. So there you go, buddies. That's out this week. So now prepare yourselves, buddies, prepare your butts. It's time for me to talk about what I've been playing. And the list is substantial. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much on anything, because as there's just so much, and I don't want things to drag. Obviously, there's always a possibility of that when I haven't got anyone to bounce off of, that I can just go off on a fucking tangent. People who listen to this on a regular basis will know that I'm right up there with the best of them when it comes to waffling on about fucking nothing. Either way, I've played a lot of games and I'm going to talk about them, buddy. And before we head into what I'd like to call Xbox Town, I will talk about a couple of things that I've been playing on the PlayStation this week. And one of them is a brand new beta that you may be familiar with, buddies, called Red Dead Online. And the other one is a recent remaster, which I was playing over the weekend, Spyro Reignited Trilogy. So, firstly, Red Dead, with Ash out of action, Funk off on his travels, PJ currently in a friend's accommodation, and Pete recently married and now doesn't play video games because he's so under the thumb, buddies. My sort of go-to team of people to play with is essentially at zero right now. I regularly turn on my PlayStation and it's a barren wasteland of nothingness. There's just no fucker on there, frankly. It was a good job I got the Xbox when I did, because there's no cunt to play with anymore, buddies. Poor old JfG Alex is all alone. There's nobody there. So, with that in mind, obviously Red Dead Online, bit of an issue for me if I want to get the most out of it. And for me, getting the most out of it is playing with a group of friends, rather than jumping in with randoms and griefing people and so on. But I felt that I needed to dip a toe in, obviously. It's the big talking point of the week. We do a gaming podcast, so here we are. So I suppose at this point, I probably don't have a great deal to say about the actual overall minute-to-minute experience of this, and it would be better to discuss that once I've played a fair old bit of it with Ash when he's back in action, and maybe some of his dads. So just to start off with, first piece of information I've got for you is Rockstar have announced that the progress that you make during the beta may well not carry over to the final release. They also haven't announced how long the beta is going to be. What I can tell you is you can't pay for currency at this point, which you would then lose, at least at the time of recording. This takes a while to get going. That's the other thing. It's a common trend with online games these days that you just want to kind of jump in there and you fucking can't, because you have to go through a load of spiel and stuff. On this occasion, I'm more than willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. World building's kind of Rockstar's thing. I think they've done a fantastic job with the single player aspect of this game. So I can quite understand that they want to set the scene. But what that does mean is if you're planning on jumping in quickly to test this out with friends, I'd highly recommend you jump on at an earlier date and get that first hour out the way, because it will take you an hour to from firing up Red Dead Online to getting to the stage where you can party up with people and spend time with them in the world. There's a whole hour here of exposition and storytelling and a couple of missions. You got to get your horse. You know, there's bits and pieces here. And even when you get to the stage where you're going online, at first you just have to matchmake with randoms, go on a mission with them just to see how it works. And then you'll do a mission where you rustle some horses and get back to your camp, at which point you're good to go. You're in the world. You can join a standard sort of free roam and invite your friends, party up, and so on. A few things I've noticed. Once you put your camp down, then that will kind of free roam. They'll chuck players in who have other camps, but none of the camps will ever be too close to one another. You'll also have a white flag in your camp which you can raise, and that prevents anyone from coming in and butchering you if you're just starting out. Obviously, a lot of players didn't really realise that or necessarily pay attention to the text that was coming up, as the moment that I logged in to the actual game with other members in the server, a whole posse of people came charging into my camp, firing away, trying to murder me, punch me, and so on, achieving nothing because I was invincible with my white flag up. And that's a nice touch, as well as the worrying shape of things to come. We always had the most fun on GTA as a 4 or a 5 in a private game, so that we couldn't be griefed and have loads of other people annoy the fuck out of us, because I think Slipknot said it best, buddies, people equals shit. So, tends to be the best. I did jump into the standard overworld and just went off on a bit of a run, got killed a few times, but also met some characters who didn't murder me straight away. They sort of waved, maybe beckoned me somewhere, showed me stuff. So there is scope for that, but I think what you really want for your sort of best possible chance at a fun experience is a fairly sizable community that you can join, not necessarily always in party chat or voice chat, but just a group of people that you can join so that you know that you're vaguely amongst friends, or at least not amongst trolls. In terms of things to do, missions, games, jobs, or whatever, it's very GTA Online here. Seems to be a mixture of single-player style stories for co-op. You've got races, horse races, and so on. There's going to be plenty to do. The whole map is available, the whole thing. And overall, yeah, it looks fun. The character creation thing was quite fun. You're kind of broken out of prison near the beginning, so you start off building your character, and then they take your prison photo, and then they're transporting you, and so on. And that's quite a nice touch. Yeah, overall, not a great deal more to say from me at this point. I haven't experienced it properly with friends yet, and that's kind of where it's going to live and die, I think. But very promising, and certainly from a technical standpoint, no issues whatsoever that I had seen. I've had no disconnects or anything. Everyone I've met has been stable connection-wise. I haven't seen any signs of lag or latency or glitching or anything like that. It all looks pretty good. So early signs are very, very good, and hopefully that thing will get out of beta pretty quickly, because you probably wouldn't want to spend too much time going through the different missions and stuff, receiving rewards that you can use with your camp and so on, and then lose all of those when the thing releases proper. So that's Red Dead, and then very briefly on PlayStation, Spyro the Reignited trilogy. I just wanted to talk about very briefly. I didn't play a great deal of this because the missus had brought her family over, and they were all playing it while I was doing a roast dinner in the kitchen. So I was kind of just dipping in and out, played a little bit, and I've played probably half hour to an hour since then as well. This is a gorgeous game. Obviously, this is a remake rather than a remaster, and as such, they weren't stuck with the constraints of the original engine in any way, or the original textures, or anything like that. This looks, for all the world, like a brand new game. It's glorious looking, right up there with any sort of more recent platformers, I suppose. Having said that, it's still a little hard to control in places. It still feels a little bit like a sort of annoying 90s platformer to a degree as we entered into 3D. So it's got that sort of video game from a bygone age about it, which is kind of at odds with the production values, which are so high. And it's a bit of a weird one for me. If you loved the game in the first place, then you'll no doubt love this. And I just feel it's got some of those 3D game tropes and design problems that games of that era had. It's just not structured in the same way. Lots of portals into little sub-game worlds. They were originally there because you couldn't load a whole overworld. That wouldn't be the case now, but obviously this is a faithful remake, and therefore there they are. A lot of these things are kind of detrimental and have been improved upon and completely removed sometimes. So yeah, a little bit strange in that respect. Probably kind of what you'd expect from a game that's mildly ancient in terms of its design. But all in all, pretty fun. Lots of interesting side quests and funny missions. challenges like flying through hoops, and I forgot what a huge element the flying mechanics were in Spyro. Traditionally, the first thing I think of is just standard platforming, a bit of double jumping perhaps, and lots of headbutting. Probably the hardest thing to control is the charge. That was always the case. They've kind of kept that for better or worse. Either way, this is an infinitely better remake stroke remaster than most of the others that I've seen. I'm looking at you, Crash. Like that was a game that was hard for people who were huge fans of Crash Bandicoot to enjoy. Whereas this is something that someone who's never picked up Spyro or even heard of it would definitely still enjoy, despite the fact that it's a remake of a much older game. So all in all, I think for your 30 quid as well, getting the 3 games, I've heard the second one probably was the highlight here, but yeah, I think it's a really solid package. Certainly one for the kids, but also if you're looking for just a simpler time, without all the bullshit, then maybe this is the place to look, buddies. So let's move into Xbox Town. This is going to be a little bit lengthy. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. Obviously I'm going to be covering a lot of games here that a lot of people may have played before. These are games that are available on PC as well as Xbox now, of course. But at the same time, I haven't bought any games outright, nor did my package that I picked up come with games. I opted for the package that had 3 months of gold, 3 months of Game Pass, and a month of EA Access as its perks, rather than picking up a pack with a game in that inevitably probably would have been part of that Game Pass anyway. That seemed like the best value for me, and I've no real intention of picking up actual Xbox games. I'm more than happy to use these subscription services to get my fill, certainly until someone I know picks up an Xbox and maybe I can try out some family sharing a la PS4. But what that has given me the opportunity to do is go through all of the exclusives, or certainly a lot of them. Any exclusives that I don't mention here, I've downloaded them, I just haven't got there yet. I only picked up the thing on Friday, that was like 4 or 5 days ago. As such, you can imagine the amount of gaming that I've done since then, buddies. So probably first stop, the actual console itself. This is an Xbox One S, which I picked up, and it's bigger than I was expecting. It's probably a similar size, slightly wider than the PS4, but a similar size overall in terms of the diameter. Certainly thicker than the PS4, taller, but pretty sleek in its own special way. It looks pretty nice under my TV, next to my PS4 and SNES Mini. It's incredibly quiet, to the point where I hardly even know that it's on a lot of the time, and that goes for in the heat of playing games as well. It's absolutely near silent. To be comparing it to my 5-year-old PS4 that's been on for thousands of hours, my PS4 sounds like a hairdryer for the most part when I fire up any games on it now. But it's been a loyal servant for thousands of hours since 2013 launch. So I can't really grumble and I can't really compare the two. But it is nice how quiet it is. The menu system on the Xbox One, frankly, is shit. I don't like it at all. The home screen is horrible. It's got a custom background option and a custom signature colour option. But you're still flooded with ads and services, things that you don't really want. You can't just have all of your games displayed on the first screen that loads with the console. You can set up folders in a similar way to the PS4 and have them as tabs so that each time you press down off of that home screen, you have a separate folder, and that's quite an elegant way of doing things. But I'd like more customization of the home screen. I think it's pretty ugly and pretty frustrating and annoying that I've got to sit there and look at stuff I don't give a flying fuck about. You know, the Xbox Elite Controller Design Studio is perpetually on the home screen of my console. It's a button that I will never press, and yet I have to fucking look at it every time I turn the system on. In terms of speed navigating around the menus, it feels really quite strong. The whole thing takes a good 5 minutes though, from getting to the home screen to all of the online content loading in. Takes a really long time. And you've got these tabs along the top. Another frustrating thing. You can't customize these tabs. You can navigate them with R1 and L1. But the fact there's 5 or 6 tabs and I'd like to get rid of sort of 4 of them isn't really a good look. I mean, you've got a whole one dedicated to live streams. It's just 20 boxes of random dickheads streaming Fortnite. I don't want that on my console at all, and it annoys the fuck out of me that I have to have it there. The fact that I have to scroll past that menu to get to the store, for example, is dumb. It's just dumb. And the fact, another thing that I've really noticed is there's a Game Pass tab at the top, which I'd imagine would be incredibly annoying to anyone who doesn't have any interest in paying for Game Pass. But at the same time, that doesn't seem to marry up properly with the store. If I go into the Game Pass list and select a game, often it won't give me the option to immediately download it despite being a Game Pass member. It will ask me if I want to buy it. And then conversely, if I move on to the next tab and go onto the actual store, find that very same game, I'm presented with the opportunity to download, and it says, as a Game Pass member, you're entitled to download and play this. So it's a bit fucked up there, and that's not great. What I will say is, when you press the Xbox button and it brings up your little menu, that is very nicely designed. You've got a sort of home hub screen. You can see it's got a list of recent things that you've loaded up so that you can load them from there again. The game that you're playing is there, of course, and you can access all of its background content, DLC, look at all the details about it, close it if you want. The Xbox kind of seems to work in a way that the Windows 10 kind of does with these little apps. So if you fire up the store, then it'll bring up a little icon and go to the app menu. You can then close those. Although I think if you weren't really familiar with that, then I don't know exactly how detrimental that would be to performance. At one point I had the EA Game Pass, Microsoft Store, Xbox settings, and Skype that I was trying out all open at the same time, and that has to impact performance on a system that's already a little underpowered. I think it's probably fair to say. So that's a little bit weird, but also it's difficult. You want to leave this stuff open if it's something someone's using and want to get back to it quickly, and that's impressive, and so on. Downloads seem really fast. The store, the way that the store's put together, the way that your installed stuff's put together with the tile system of Windows 10, works fine for me. I think it looks quite nice. There's no bullshit there, nothing I don't need. So I quite like that. But all in all, yeah, not especially impressive. Probably nothing much between them. I'm not a huge fan of the PS4 UI either, if I'm honest. The fact, though, that I can have a home screen fire up when I load the PS4 that has all my folders and the availability of all my games probably puts it ahead of the two, I would say. Speaking of the Xbox One S hardware, I have to mention the controller. I really don't like the controller. And the main reason, and possibly the only reason that I don't like the controller, is the triggers. And I've heard that it wasn't necessarily just exactly the same on the original Xbox One controllers. But regardless, these Xbox One S controllers, the triggers have got a point to them. So they kind of arc up to a sort of a point, and then they arc back. So rather than a sort of flat trigger or whatever, you've got more of a sort of inverted semicircle. And I find that incredibly uncomfortable. What it basically does is makes it so that your hands have to be in a specific position. There's no movement. You can't set up on a specific point of the trigger because the actual the sharp point at the end of the trigger will prevent you from doing that. So I'm used to using my fingertips on the triggers, certainly past that first joint, the end of my finger. On the Xbox controller, I have to use the middle joint of my finger, as in the bit between the tip joint and the base joint, if you're following. And I don't have as much control. I don't feel like I've got that, fingertip control. You're not going to beat that. That's what you're used to. Now, I'd consider myself a fairly dexterous individual. I've got good hand-eye. I've played piano and guitar throughout my life, so I should be pretty well geared up to adapt to these things. And I am kind of adapting, but at the same time, when I'm doing a racing game, I'm finding I'm constantly trying to go down these triggers with my finger, and I can't, to the point where I actually started getting a bit of rubbing on my right finger from holding down the accelerator on a couple of racing games. So yeah, I mean, the analog sticks are fine. I've never had a problem with them not being side by side. I had to get used to the opposite when I switched from 360. The buttons are nice enough. The bumpers would be fine, but because of where I'm having to move my middle fingers for the triggers, I find I keep accidentally pressing the bumpers, and that's incredibly annoying, especially in racing games, because R1 tends to be change of view. So I'm constantly switching cameras while I'm racing along, which is fucking annoying as well. I'm sure I'll get used to it, but I have to say, I don't think I should have to. The 360 controller was kind of perfect, and I think it's a testament to how good that controller was that I was able to transition to the DualShock 4 so easily. And that's just not the case here at all. I think they've kind of shat the bed in that respect. Bit of an issue. So yeah, that's your console. And I suppose we shall move on to some games. So let's get stuck into some video games, buddies. That's why we're all here after all. And I thought obviously the best place to start would be some of the exclusives. Worth mentioning, as I said before, just to reinforce, every game that I'm going to talk about here is available on either Xbox Game Pass or EA Access. I haven't bought any software, so Xbox Game Pass is $7.99 a month in this country, and very similarly priced elsewhere. It provides you with a list of over 200 games, and you can download any of them and play any of them as much as you want, as long as you are subscribed. You do not keep any of those games if you cancel your subscription, but it also means that you don't have to necessarily buy anything if you just want to dip into the library. It also was announced fairly recently, within the last 6 months or so, I think it was E3 in fact, that any new first-party Microsoft games would be hitting that service on day one going forwards. So games coming out in the future, Crackdown 3 as a good example, they will be on that service straight away whenever the next Halo or Gears comes out, the next Forza Horizon. That's all going to be on there on launch day from now on, so you haven't got to buy them. And all in all, I think that's a pretty good service. I think 6 months in, you might feel differently, though, as you work your way through the biggest titles. Obviously, there are announcements quite regularly of new games being added to the service, sort of 6 or 7 each month, kind of come and go. But normally you've only got maybe 1 or 2 sort of standout titles there. I suppose what it comes down to is, do you think you're getting £8 worth of value monthly from that service? And I suspect the answer's probably yes. So, yeah, there we are. So all of this is I'll tell you whether it was Game Pass or EA. It should be self-explanatory, but, just in case. Starting off with Quantum Break. So you may have, some of these games you might have forgotten about. We certainly haven't talked about them for a very, very long time, basically since they came out. And it's the case with a lot of these Xbox exclusives that they reviewed sort of 7s and 8s, but they just haven't got the star power, the standout, critically acclaimed shit that you got in this cycle on the PlayStation. I'm thinking Uncharted, Horizon, God of War, more recently Spider-Man. These are massive games that kind of outshone a lot of their Xbox counterparts, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean I don't want to play them. So it's been, to be honest, it's been proper exciting this week, having so much to get stuck into. It's been really fun, and I'm really enjoying myself. So Quantum Break, this is a game from Remedy, creators of Max Payne, of course, in the past, and Alan Wake, a studio that I've always been very fond of. I loved the Max Payne games 1 and 2. I enjoyed Rockstar's take on it as well. Alan Wake I was a big fan of as well. I played through that numerous times. They've always done a pretty good job with their world building and also fun game mechanics. I mean, these guys were the first to really master bullet time. And Quantum Break is no exception in that respect. This is also the game that launched when Don Matrick was still talking about various TV stuff at the launch of the Xbox One. It was obviously planned fairly early doors that this would have a fairly sizable television-style component to it. So the game is the game, and then between chapters on the game, there are these 15-20-minute episodes of a TV show with all of the characters from the game in. Now, the mocap and the facial stuff is very good, so it's very obvious who's who, and for the most part, the actors that they've got into this, it's a pretty strong cast as well. You've got a couple of guys from Lost in here. Lance Reddick is predominantly involved, of The Wire and Fringe and whatever else you want. And Fringe is kind of the thing that this makes me think of to a degree, in that it's a bit cheesy, but it's fun. This isn't just because Lance Reddick's in it. It's a fun game, and it's a linear story-based third-person shooter. It's all to do with time, like not time travel, but time sort of going forwards and backwards on the fly, and all of your sort of superpowers, I suppose you'd call them, are directly linked to time. So you could create a time bubble in front of you that stops bullets dead, that acts as like a shield. You can right bumper around to basically speed like the Flash into cover, and if you aim and shoot towards the end of that little dash, then you go into sort of a slow motion bullet time thing. You can throw time bubbles at enemies to stop them in the place, and almost chuck sort of grenade-like time bubbles at them that sends them up in the air or pings them off into the non-existence. And all of that is quite a lot of fun, mixed with pretty solid gunplay, I would say, cover-based gunplay. Again, no snap to cover. I've always preferred snap to cover, but it seems to be a real dying breed. So it's just one of those things, I guess. But yeah, it's ramped up. I'm sort of 3 hours in, and it's pretty challenging at this point. You have to kind of utilise your whole arsenal of things. The actual story itself is pretty compelling. It's a nice idea, this sort of glitch in time, and your friend who you're kind of helping with experiments disappearing into a bubble of time, and then things happening where he's suddenly in charge of stuff in the past that you didn't know about in the future, which affects the present. It's pretty well done. And yeah, as I said, Fringe probably the best way to talk about it. That's kind of what it reminds me of. It's good fun. I think it's going to be pretty forgettable. I'll make my way through it. I expect it to be 10-15 hours long, and I probably won't think about it very much after that. But the journey is often more important than the destination, and that feels like it's definitely the case here. The script is pretty good, considering how stupid the story is. It's not mega cheesy. It's all very well acted, as you'd expect from a lot of these guys. And yeah, it's just a blast. I've been really enjoying it. It's good fun. And yeah, probably won't be that memorable in the long run, but yeah, really fun and certainly worth playing through. Moving on to Recore, which was another one of the older exclusives. And I've not played a great deal of this, probably only an hour or so. Obviously, I've had a lot of games to play, buddies, but maybe it's pretty telling, the amount of time I've put into each one, as to whether there's anything really there for you. Recore is a third-person, sort of off-world platformer, where you play this young woman called, I can't remember, Gem, Pearl, something like that. And she's got a little dog that's a robot. It's pretty cutesy. This is probably a direct comparisons with Knack, in that this is probably the Xbox's version. It's like Knack crossed with Horizon, in that you're a human who can befriend robots and fights other robots. In terms of the combat, though, this is far more I don't know, kind of bullet hell in its sort of leaping about, lock on with left trigger, fire your pistol with right trigger, little pistol machine gun that you've got. The graphics are not great. It looks a pretty old gen to me, and I find that with a lot of the texturing, but also the landscapes. You know, we're talking fairly sort of sizable open world Mars-esque kind of situation here, and a lot of it is very polygonal. It's very sort of triangular cliffs and stuff, but also it seems sometimes you need to actually traverse those. They're not necessarily there as walls preventing you from going there, and that's really odd as well. There's just something about the connection between your character and the floor is, I don't know if the shadows are off or the lighting engine or something, but it looks pretty ropey, and it just doesn't really, it kind of looks like you're kind of ice skating through the levels. It's not pretty. The combat's fine. There's some nice elements like double jump, rocket boost, grapple. It's pretty satisfying to play, but it's just fine. It's designed nicely, the acting's fine, the character's likeable, but it's just a bit uninspired, a bit generic. It's a classic sort of 7 out of 10 game. It's a hell of a lot fucking better than Knack, I will say that. But yeah, it's the sort of thing you play through kind of mindlessly, relatively enjoyable, but nothing special. And maybe that's a kind of summary of most of the titles on the Xbox, exclusive-wise at least. One that doesn't apply to, though, buddies, is Forza Horizon 4. This is probably the flagship title on the service at the moment, because Forza Horizon is a very popular brand. And rightly so. This is a masterpiece, frankly, from Playground Games. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm not just saying that because it's in the UK. But it's a just wonderfully immersive, impressive experience. The atmosphere that the game creates is very fun, but graphically it really is quite gorgeous. The whole thing's propped up nicely by the fact that you're working your way through seasons, as in literal seasons, and the entire landscape will change. So you've got your spring with all of the flowers budding and so on, sort of warm summer with all the sort of lusciousness, and then into the autumn, and all of the leaves sort of turn orange and brown, and lots of light rain and beautiful puddle effects. The reflections in this thing are unbelievable. Like, everything is perfectly reflected onto your vehicle. The winter obviously looks wonderfully impressive as well, and this is a game that's, you know, road racing, off-road racing, a mixture of the two. It's point-to-point racing a lot of the time as well, but there are plenty of circuits through towns and villages. Some wonderful recreations of places that I've been. I'm thinking of Edinburgh, Bamborough, a special place in my heart for the little village of Bamborough up on the northeast coast, and that's in the game, near as damn exactly as I remember it, with its castle and its beach and everything. A wonderful wealth of different vehicles to drive, because this is Microsoft, this is Forza, they've got the clout to pick up this big roster of cars. This is basically what the Crew and the Crew 2 always wished it was. It's just a fantastically fun game to play, and despite its shortcomings, from my point of view, its target audience, I mean, you could probably describe this to some degree as millennial simulator to a degree. It's got sort of top shot clothes and emotes. All of the radio stations are like Radio 1 style, faux cool sort of stuff, and it's very alien to me as I become like old, fat and shitty. But it leans into it in a way where it's kind of almost self-aware, and has a lot of fun with it. So it doesn't actually become much of an issue. There's a myriad of different options of how you want to play it. Solo play, you play against drivatars, which is their buzzword for AIs created from your friends list, either with data where they've played the game, or it just uses their names. So I'm constantly up against Champ McBeard and Grandma Funk and so on, which is kind of fun. But then there's online team play. All of the races, you can edit the routes. You can create your own point-to-point routes or circuits. and it's checkpoints. So you just got to fly through those checkpoints. Some brilliant showpiece moments. I was using a Jeep Cherokee to race a hovercraft. It was taking a slightly different route. There are lots of occasions where I'm jumping it and it's jumping me and so on. Loads of stunts, just so much to do. It's one of those games where it's just such a nice place to be. And it's a real highlight. It's even at the frame rate that it runs, it very rarely drops, but it is running at a locked 30 on the base Xbox. Obviously, PC and Xbox One X, you'll get 60 frames here, and I've seen the results on YouTube, and it does make a big difference. But there's something about the way that this game is rendered, the sort of moment-to-moment play, where it's not quite so detrimental as you'd find in something like Drive Club or The Crew, for instance. So yeah, all in all, I mean, this game alone is worth your $7.99, I would say, at least for a month or two, because there's so much game here, so much replay value. It's got all of the customization as well of a standard Forza game, so all of the upgrade system, tinkering with your car, setting up your car, changing downforce and everything. Incredibly in-depth back end because of that Forza pedigree, despite the fact that what they're really creating here is an arcade game. So yeah, for me, obviously I'm a racing enthusiast. I'm very much looking forward to picking up that little gadget. There's a gadget that you can get called Drive Hub, which allows you to use your specific steering wheel on other devices. So I'll be able to use my PS4 Thrustmaster steering wheel on the Xbox, and obviously that'll change things greatly because there's a fair few racing games on this console that I'm looking forward to getting stuck into. But yeah, just for the fun of it, the atmosphere and the mood, I've been very much enjoying Forza Horizon 4, and I would highly recommend it. Brilliant game. Moving on, Sunset Overdrive. Let's talk about Sunset Overdrive. This is another older game in that it was a 2014, 2015. Either way, it's an exclusive, so I'd never played it before. I was vaguely aware that it had sort of Jet Set Radio vibes, and it certainly does. This is sort of Jet Set Radio, your sort of inline skating stroke Tony Hawk-esque kind of game, but crossed with Dying Light in that you've got a weapon you can fire while you're grinding around. There's zombies everywhere. It takes the piss out of pop culture to the nth degree. The zombification is actually caused by a new energy drink. The characters are really obnoxious, but they're supposed to be, and they kind of pull that off pretty well. Lots of clever comic book touches to this, lots of freeze frames, kind of like Gearbox always pulled off very, very well with Borderlands when they introduced characters. There's a lot of that going on. Lots of idents. It's very slick. The music's kind of perfect and kicks in really nice. I'm just a bit shit at this game, to be honest, but it's a lot of fun. I think that Ash would love this because he was a bit of a Tony Hawk's legend back in the day, so he'd probably kick ass on this. I always liked Jet Set Radio. So yeah, I kind of this is all about those mechanics, to be honest. The environment is very nice graphically. It's beautifully colourful and a pretty nice place to be. The idea of the game being constant movement, basically, because if you stop, then you're kind of overrun by zombies. But yeah, all in all, it's a really fun experience. It's just whether there's enough enjoyment out of them at the sort of base mechanics to carry you through an entire sort of experience there, because from what I've been working out, all the missions and things that you do in this game, they're sort of fetch quests and very basic open world stuff. So it's whether that slidey, grindy, transition-y, score-based mechanic is enough. And I think for a lot of people it would be, but not necessarily for me. But it's good. I like it. Next, the Master Chief Collection. This was one of the big pulls to the console for me. I've always been a Halo fan. Played through a 1, 2, 3, 4, half of ODST, half of Reach. Hadn't played 5, but Halo 3 was kind of a big one for me. But I played through the first 2 on the original Xbox. And I've always been a fan. I really enjoy the Halo franchise, even though it's possibly getting on a bit now, maybe past its sell-by date. For those that don't know, the Master Chief Collection is Halo 1, 2, 3, and ODST. I think 4 as well. Completely remastered. So these are, totally remastered from the ground up by 343 Studios. This was after Bungie left Microsoft for Activision, God help them. And 343 took over the reins of the Halo franchise. And they've done an amazing job of remastering. Certainly, obviously, it's more noticeable the older the game is. So the first game, which I must have completed that first game 5 times, Halo, the original, once on PC, actually, as well. This is a loving recreation of the Halo games, and just incredibly impressive for a remaster. And you can tell how much of a remaster it is, because the game just looks 10 years younger at the click of a button. You press the select button on the controller, and it seamlessly switches from the original base game to the remastered version, so you can see exactly what's going on. The frame rate doesn't change, there's no stutter, there's no delay. It's incredibly impressive stuff, and I've always been a fan of that ever since I played some of those early point-and-click remasters. Certainly the Monkey Island one springs to mind as a really nice remaster before LucasArts was destroyed. So yeah, I actually found that I often preferred the original game's look and colour palette to the new one, despite how impressive it was technically. But I grew up playing these games, so I think it's probably got a lot to do with that. The controls are great. It's Halo. It feels exactly the same as Halo, obviously, albeit on an inferior fucking controller. It's a real fun shooter to play through. Obviously, this is full co-op. It's got all the online. Everything works. Everything's there. It's just a hell of a lot of game, and I found myself really getting into it. The voice acting's pretty solid as well. I mean, obviously they haven't changed that voice acting. It's just coming out of different character models, but I was kind of impressed by how well it held up, the original game, if I'm honest. And that's the only one I've played so far. I haven't dipped into the others, so I'll probably have more to say about this in the coming weeks. But obviously really good fun, and the perfect sort of collection to be on this Game Pass for you to feel like you're getting your money's worth. Moving on to something slightly less impressive, Super Lucky's Tale, which is a sort of throwaway platformer, really. It's got some nice touches. You're a little fox, by the way, just jumping about. The art style's pretty nice. It's very cartoony. This is definitely a sort of more of a kid's game. But there's some nice touches here. The camera switches between sort of 3D, 2.5D, and 2D perspectives, meaning that there often feels like more variety than there is actually necessarily present. It's quite nice to be in a sort of open world and running about in a 3D environment, and then maybe switch around a corner, and it does that sort of Team Sonic kind of thing with a Sonic Team, rather, where it just pins you against the wall and you're suddenly in a 2D game rather than a 3D game. There's some nice mechanics here as well, like burrowing and burrowing through the ground, coming up on enemies rather than jumping on them. That's quite nice. But all in all, it's pretty forgettable. It's a nice story. Production values are obviously very high. You would expect that from a Microsoft game. But it all feels a little bit sort of like the engine's creaking at times. It's got that kind of really early Unity look about it, where everything's a little bit sort of, I don't really know how to describe it, kind of clay looking. But it's all just a bit creaky. It feels like it's going to fall over at any moment. So that's kind of something that you've got to contend with. But yeah, pretty forgettable, really, and not really something I'll be putting any time into. Next, we have Zoo Tycoon. This was a game that came out very early doors on the Xbox One, possibly a launch title. It's great stuff, actually. This is a fun, simple zoo builder, but you can also go down to a 3D perspective and interact with everything. There's a huge selection of animals, enclosures, stalls and services that you can use. You can kind of move the camera all around. It's a proper sim builder in that respect, but it's pretty simplistic in its design, in your building designs. So I think that for that reason, it feels a little bit like every zoo will kind of be the same zoo. It lacks that uniqueness of a proper sim builder. And this is probably mainly due to the modular style of the game, in that you pick an attraction, you sort of plonk it down in its completion, and then link it up to another module that another attraction's at via a path. Now you can place all of these wherever you like. You can put the paths in wherever you like. So it's got a little bit going on for it there. But for the most part, that's basically it. You can kind of customize the color of fences, and you can name everything, the attractions and the animals. It feels very much like a kid's game. It's not the sort of thing you're going to get stuck into in a way that maybe sort of a theme park, a theme hospital, a roller coaster tycoon, City Skylines. But it's good fun. It's good sort of fairly simplistic fun. Nice little sort of unlock tree as you get more guests into the park. And I tried it in sandbox mode as well, just so that I could try everything out. And was pretty impressed. The animations and everything. You can kind of interact with the animals. You can manually feed them or hire staff to do that for you, and so on. So it's all kind of there for you. You can drive about in a golf buggy. It's a nice game, but pretty shallow in the grand scheme of things, which is probably the best bet for the audience that I think it's trying to find. But yeah, worth a couple of hours of your time. You'll have fun, and then you probably never load it up again if you're an adult. Speaking of, let's talk about Disneyland Adventures. This is, I think, from the same guys as Zoo Tycoon. And the missus is kind of hooked on this at the moment, even though it's shit, and she knows it's shit. She's happy to admit it. This is a Disneyland simulator, basically. It's a third-person perspective run around Disneyland. Meet Disney characters, and they give you fetch quests. They're annoying mini-games based on Disneyland attractions. It's bollocks, basically. There's nothing more to say about it. She's hooked on it because she's always been a bit of a collector. So she just keeps playing these crappy mini-games, going on about how she's, got this new achievement or whatever. She's always been a closet achievement hunter, the missus, but she's enjoying herself, and that's fine. It might have something to do with the fact that my family and I are intending on heading over to Disneyland in LA next year, so she's getting a bit of a taste. But she loves a bit of it. Either way, it's nothing to write home about, but again, if you got kids, then absolute bread and butter here. It's going to be something you're going to want to have a look at. Moving on, how are we doing? I think we're about halfway there, buddies. So, hopefully this isn't just drivel to you. Hopefully you're enjoying it. I don't really know. There's not much else I can do, buddies, so. As the great band Bewitched once said, c'est la vie. Blame it on the weather, man. So, let's get stuck into a couple of EA titles. This is EA Access, which acts as a separate service to Xbox Game Pass. You can pick it up for about £20 a year, and it gives you access to the EA Vault. Their words, not mine, because I'm not a fanny, but it gives you access to essentially any EA game that's over a year old. You can download and play, and then you get these trials of their newer games. So that was one of the reasons that I wanted in here. I don't think that this is a service that I will necessarily keep, especially as there's a lot of sports games involved here, and I'm the only one playing on this platform out of the people that I know. So I'm not sure why I'd bother. But either way, it has given me the opportunity to try out FIFA 19 as part of a 10-hour trial. I've also got Battlefield 5 installed. I've got a 10-hour trial of that as well that I can get stuck into. I have not yet done that, but I will. It's got Madden and NBA and NHL, as well as a few other piles of shit like Need for Speed Payback, but also some better stuff like Dragon Age Inquisition, the Mass Effect games. I've got all of those installed and ready to go as well. So I won't dwell on these football games. I know that there's only a very sort of minute interest, but FIFA 19, I've now played 6 hours of FIFA 19, playing it through my career mode on there, so I get a real taste for this game. And I've also installed FIFA 18 because I'll inevitably run out of the trial of 19 and wanted to see how 18 compared. This game is fine. It's quite fun. I quite enjoy it. It's very smooth and fluid, but ultimately nowhere near the sort of creative and artistic feel that you get from playing Pro Evolution Soccer. They've fixed many, many issues here from when we used to regularly buy FIFA games. I think the last one we all picked up was FIFA 13. I think that was the last time we picked up FIFA. And at that time, the game was a ping the ball about simulator where some players were incredibly quick and you could just ping over the top balls to them and that they'd run onto and score. Everyone was like a 4-foot midget in the online modes because that made you have 99 for speed and acceleration. And it completely ruined the game, but also it kind of felt quite stagnant, FIFA, that they hadn't really improved it very much between, say, 2009 and 2012-13. Then FIFA switched to the Battlefield engine, and I've never really been impressed with it since. I don't think it looks very good, and I maintain that from the moment they switched. I think it was 14 or 15 that they switched engines. I just don't think it looks very good. It's not a good engine for player models, and that's kind of crucial in a football game. It's kind of like the bread and butter of the thing. And sometimes I'll fire up a match on FIFA 19. I was playing Fulham, like Bournemouth versus Fulham, and they're supposed to have all of the Premier League stadiums on here. And it loaded up, and it looked fucking dog shit. Like, all the characters looked like they were like House of Wax motherfuckers. The stadium looked super low res. The skybox was a fucking joke. It was just orange. It was supposed to be like sunset. It was just block colour orange. The game just doesn't look very good. And then on occasion, in the right weather conditions, in the right stadium, it can look pretty tasty. But I think all in all, graphically far inferior to PES. And I don't think PES looks amazing. I don't think either of the football games really look as good as they should for the year that we're in and the improvements that they should make. And a lot of that probably stems from the fact that they've got like a 9-month cycle on these fucking things before they have to start pushing copies out the door again. All in all, yeah, I've been having a reasonable amount of fun on FIFA 19, but the career mode is very similar to the last one I played, which was 6-7 years ago. They basically seem to have made fuck all strides forward in that respect. There's a reasonably annoying negotiation system now where it actually renders your manager in his office talking to the opposition's manager, which is a nice idea but kind of weird. Like the idea that Jose Mourinho would come and meet with me manager to manager and we'd discuss and decide upon the price of the sale of a player or the acquisition of a player is stupid. It's all just subtitled. There's no voices or anything. I can kind of understand that. But all in all, not particularly impressive. The game itself, it works, and that's where it's got a massive leg up on PES. But other than that, there's nothing much to write home about here. And having played a couple of hours of FIFA 18, I really can't tell much difference between the two games. And certainly the career modes are identical. There's nothing different between FIFA 18's career mode and FIFA 19's. And taking to the forums, it would appear that that's been the case since 16. They've done nothing. The only difference is they've put in those manager discussions, which is hardly a selling point, I think. So I'm quite enjoying playing it. I do think it's something that we might pick up on PS4 if it drops to sort of 20 quid or so. But at this moment in time, there's just no incentive to pick up that, which is just very disappointing. It's leaving me without a good football game to play at the moment. So moving on from football, Need for Speed Payback. I will just say this. Obviously, you know we enjoyed Need for Speed 2015. We've been playing that quite a lot recently. We've both platinumed that game now. It wasn't hard. It probably took 15 hours, but we enjoyed most of that, other than some really dodgy rubber banding and pretty annoying characters. But to be honest, this game makes that Need for Speed 2015 story and characters seem like fucking Tolkien, in the respect that everyone in Need for Speed Payback is a terrible actor with terrible lines. They're rendered horribly. The story is obnoxious and awful and miserable. It's cheesy as sin. It feels like the whole thing has been designed by fucking fat cats around a boardroom, being like, yeah, this is what they fucking want, as they sort of puff on their cigars. It's absolute shit. Terrible drivel. Awful graphics. It looks much worse than 2013's Need for Speed Rivals for some reason. I don't know how they even managed that. It's incredible. But yeah, idiotic story featuring the worst characters you've ever come across, most of which isn't skippable. The driving is certainly no better than Need for Speed 2015, possibly worse. And I do wonder if maybe that engine always was a piece of shit and it just looked good because of the lighting engine that they were able to use because it's always nighttime in Need for Speed 2015. This game starts with you driving through the desert into the city in broad daylight, and it looks fucking terrible. Absolutely awful. It doesn't control great, and there's no incentive for me to play. I played it for an hour. I'll never get that back, and I highly encourage you to never waste that hour yourselves. You don't need to, buddies. I've done that for you. You are welcome. So while we're in racing game territory, buddies, probably time to talk about Dirt 4. This is another game that's on Xbox Game Pass, and one that I've wanted for a while but haven't really been able to justify picking up because I've already got Dirt Rally and we've already got several other racing games and don't really need it. And I'd heard that it was inferior to Dirt Rally because it was more of a jack of all trades, master of none, and I would go along with that. It's good fun. There's lots of choice. I think it would excel on the wheel. That's something that I can maybe revisit in the coming months. I'm hoping that someone might buy me that Drive Hub thing for Christmas. It's mildly arcadey in a way that makes it feel like it doesn't really know what it is, Dirt 4. Dirt Rally was a sim, Dirt 3 was an arcade game. This is sort of in the middle, but as such it kind of fails to satisfy either itch. It just feels like it doesn't really know what it wanted to be. And you can make massive changes here. I mean, you can really alter things so that it feels more like Dirt Rally, but then it hasn't really got the courses from my experience. It just doesn't feel quite right. Even when you make it as simmy as possible, it still feels easier than Dirt Rally. But it's not really arcadey enough that someone who just jumps into the odd racing game would necessarily enjoy either. So I think it's kind of fallen down on its target audience there, in that I'm not sure they knew what that target audience was. But it's a nice looking game, it's fun to play. The tutorials are fantastic. Great tutorials. I know that's a really weird thing to say, but the system is in place that teach you not just how to do things, but why that's the case. And all of the physics are completely in line with real life. So it'll teach you how to get the car around bends, and it'll explain why you should do stuff. It explains, for example, the Scandi flick, where you're coming up on a tight bend, say a tight left-hander, and you turn right first to change the momentum, and then sharp left, at which point the car's unsettled and you get this sort of pendulum effect with the back of it. I find that fascinating. A lot of people might find it boring, but at least it's nice to know why you're doing something. So I think that's kind of crucial. So yeah, all in all, it's good fun. I'll definitely go back to it once I've got the wheel, but at the moment I'm having far too much fun on other racing games to really give it the time of day. Next. Oh, sorry, just took a little sip there. This is a lot of talking for one man, buddies. We're getting through it. Grid 2. I want to talk about Grid 2. It is a racing game from Codemasters. It was a 360 title that came out in 2012, I think. Something like that. 2011. It was free on Games with Gold not too long ago, and then was immediately added to the Game Pass service as well. And of all the racing games that I've played this week, it is probably the best in terms of the actual racing itself. Forza is great and modern and new and fresh and wonderful, but this is such a focused experience, and it doesn't do a great deal, but what it does fucking brilliantly. And I just feel like a lot of the mechanics from newer games kind of robbed from here to a degree. It's got the sort of rewind flashback kind of features that you'd expect from a Cody's Racer, but it's just got a fantastic handling model on the pad. Drifting is the order of the day. But the drifting here is far superior to, I think, anything else I've ever played. I know that's a bold claim, but genuinely, like, it shits all over the Need for Speed games, the handling model. It's very satisfying. The momentum's great. Braking-wise, it's kind of got that Drive Club thing where you can leave it really, really late, but you can kind of pop the back out as well. It's just cool. It's focused car list. There's sort of not a great deal. You know, we're not talking like Forza levels of hundreds of cars, but a nice focused car list, lots of interesting stuff, lots of interesting street circuits here. Gives it a sort of Gotham vibe in that you've got a lot of sort of right angled turns with red and white hoardings all the way around the outside, mixture of muscle cars, little Japanese cars, and crucially this is got a story in it that isn't really terrible, not really important either, of some sort of billionaire magnate trying to make a new racing series. Starts off in the States looking for a rookie. So it's got that sort of race driver vibe from the old sort of TOCA series, which I always loved. But yeah, you can kind of slide out and drift out, and it's got little Mazdas and hot hatches, and it's just so much fun. It's genuinely a lot of fun. Great selection of different types of races, time trials, eliminators. It's got a wonderful system whereby you can set the race to random in terms of its configuration, and then it will construct a track on the fly around a city. So you don't necessarily know where you're going. You have to really pay attention to the signposts and everything. But each time it's different. It takes various roads, does it sort of stage at a time, and you can just fly through and have a good time. So yeah, it's really good. As well as the street races, there's several circuits on there as well. It's got Yas Marina at the Abu Dhabi Ding Dong. It's got Brands Hatch Indy circuit on there. So yeah, it's a real mixture. And then you can be flying down the Champs-Élysées under the Eiffel Tower. This is a game that I'm very excited to be playing with other people, and there seem to be people playing this online, despite the fact that it's a backwards compatible game. Also seems like a good time to mention how impressed I am with the backwards compatibility. The way that it just fires up as though you've launched a virtual Xbox 360. You get all the idents and the introduction and everything. And if you press options and select, then it brings up the old blades. So you can look at the old 360 setup. You can scroll over to achievements. It's all there. I just think the integration's really lovely there. I was a massive fan of the 360 console. It was the console that I spent the most time with ever, and it's a really nice way of kind of revisiting it. So yeah, Grid 2. If you've got the Game Pass, get stuck in. Even if you're not a big racing fan, this is a very accessible game. It's a lot of fun. It stands the test of time as well. It does not look shit. Considering how old it is, it's a pretty tasty looking game still. And that's a testament to Codemasters, to be honest. Nearly there, buddies. We have 5 more titles, but I haven't got a lot to say about most of them. Firstly, Grip. This is a game that I was very excited to play because it is a spiritual successor to a game called Roll Cage, which came out in, 98, 99 maybe, which was kind of a Wipeout clone, but with those cars with big tyres to the point where they are wider on both edges to the bodies of the cars, meaning that you can flip over and keep going, and also ride up down on ceilings and roofs and so on. I remember it being a lot of fun, this game. This is not that game. This is an uncontrollable mess. I found it incredibly difficult to see what I was doing. It's vomit-inducing. This is from someone who regularly plays VR, by the way. This is not a VR game. It's really hard to know which direction you're going in. If you crash or flip over, I'll set off in the wrong direction. There's just too many variables, too many ways that you can crash and fuck it. And the actual gameplay isn't that satisfying. The thing fucking chugs as well. I mean, this engine is falling over. Like, you can see it deconstructing before your eyes. It's sub 30 frames a lot of the time. And in split screen, which I couldn't believe was an option after I played a couple of single player races, I was like, surely this isn't going to cope. And it doesn't. So yeah, pretty unimpressive. Not really Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not held up very well alongside the other racing games that I've played this week, so what can you say? But it's a little bit sad because obviously I was hoping for something a bit better, as I was a big fan of the previous game, even though it's a spiritual successor rather than an actual one. But yeah, there we go, buddy. So that's Grip. Yeah. So City Skylines is something I'm not going to talk about for very long, but I wanted to just see how it compared. Obviously, I've been playing it both on my laptop, which hasn't been thanking me for that, and on GeForce Now, which obviously it looks great, but uses a lot of bandwidth. And yeah, it's pretty low res. I would say that it's probably running in the region of sort of 1024 by 980, something like that. It's pretty low res. But the system that they've put in place for using everything, that was the thing I was concerned about the most. Obviously, there's a lot of controls. You kind of need a whole suite of keys, and you haven't got that. You've got a controller, and in the past, people have kind of made a bit of a meal of that sort of thing. But on this occasion, pretty decent, I would say. It's pretty easy to navigate, fairly self-explanatory. It's not awkward, it's just going to obviously be slow because you've got menus upon menus upon menus due to a lack of shortcut options. So, yeah, all in all, pretty fun, and whether I'll actually play that at all on the console when I can actually use the mouse and keyboard. I did look to see if it had mouse and keyboard support, but I think that would be a little bit mean to suggest that they would do that when that system hadn't even been announced when the game was launched, and they've basically designed a whole UI with a controller in mind. It's not such a simple case of flicking a switch and being away with another control method. So there we go. Snake Pass is a game that's multi-platform, but I hadn't played it, so I fired it up on the Xbox because it was part of the Game Pass service. And it's a really fun, clever little game that the mechanics are so different that it kind of elevates it above a standard kind of puzzle platformer. The fact that you have to kind of waggle from side to side to slither forward, it's something that kind of makes sense as a snake, but at the same time you don't necessarily think of it straight away, and it really adds to it. Those mechanics. It's sort of to lift your head up, and you gotta, if you're gonna climb up things, you gotta kind of make sure you're wrapped around them. You get the idea. It's a third person puzzle platformer where you are a slithery snake. So it's cool. Finally, a couple of old games to finish, buddy. Knights of the Old Republic, which is a very old Xbox original BioWare Star Wars game. Hugely loved, massive community favourite, and I felt like I needed to try it because I wanted to see the Xbox original backwards compatibility, and it's absolutely seamless as you would expect, although obviously in 4:3 rather than widescreen, which is a little bit of a galling thing when you first see it. But it all works perfectly, and the game runs very nice. It's very old. And I think it's too old. The game is probably too old. I've had this problem in the past. I don't think it's aged particularly well here. The character models are horrifying, and the texturing's pretty awful, and the combat's a little bizarre. It's kind of like a mixture of live action and turn-based, in that you kind of run around, decide on an enemy, and then lock on and hit fire, and then it kind of auto-fires in a turn-based way between you and the enemies. There's a lot of Mass Effect in here, which was another game that I tried to get into retrospectively and failed miserably too. I just couldn't get on with that shit at all. And so yeah, it's obviously a classic that I wasn't there for at the beginning, and as is so often the case, you either get into those or you don't. If you haven't got the love for them, then sometimes it's a bit tricky. What I am interested in trying out is Dragon Age Inquisition, which is a current gen game that's part of the Game Pass service as well. A much newer BioWare game, and as such, I might have a bit more joy with that. So that's the plan. And finally, buddies, to end the show, as well as this mammoth section that I've been recording for you here, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas 2. Which is another backwards compatible game. It was my first opportunity to try the backwards compatibility with an actual disc-based game. This is a game that I own among many others. I've also got SSX, which is backwards compatible, but unfortunately a lot of the games that I'd like to be backwards compatible aren't. I'm thinking Gotham as a perfect example. Pretty annoying that it isn't on that service, but what can you do? It's a shame. Either way, Rainbow Six Vegas 2, it's exactly as I remember it. I mean, we played this game roughly a year ago for our retro games night. Retro on a 360, maybe not particularly retro. But yeah, it's a fucking great game. What I did notice was my Xbox Live Vision camera data isn't there because it was on the old console, so I'm just some generic dude, which is a bit fucking annoying. But I have still got my bubblegum camo buddies, and I did a bit of tea hunting, and it's really satisfying. And I found that the muscle memory, even though I'm on a different controller on a different console, that muscle memory was still there. The sort of just like kind of planting on the trigger and just like almost like painting a target with bullets rather than holding down and firing. You just sort of little sort of half-second fire, another little quarter-second fire, just kind of peppering bullets, and that keeps your aim down and keeps the recoil from getting out of control. I did look at the online here, and there were 4 full rooms of people playing Attack and Defend on Villa and Train Yard, so that's kind of heartening, and I was pretty pleased about that. And this is a game that, yeah, if anyone else, I know that the Funk, when he comes back off of his travels, he's planning on picking up an Xbox off the back of some of the stuff I've been talking about recently. So I've no doubt we'll be back playing Rainbow Six Vegas. It's aged brilliantly. We've said before why. It's because it looks shit in the first place. So it doesn't matter that it still looks shit. It always did. We don't have this memory of it being a gorgeously graphical masterpiece of some kind. So, yeah. There we are, buddies. And that is my mammoth Xbox selection. All of these games, bar Vegas, are available on the services, the subscription services. I've been very impressed with all of the different things on there, and also some of the extra bells and whistles you get with the Xbox. For example, having that kind of app store. You can use apps from the Microsoft Store that are Windows based rather than just Xbox One based. It's something that, you know, if you go on the PlayStation and think, oh, I want an app for maps or travel or TripAdvisor or something like that, you can't have any of that shit on a PlayStation, and possibly you wouldn't want to, but on an Xbox you can. You can have all of those different things. There's also a lot more in the way of media player services, subscription services, native support for stuff like Crunchyroll, for example, and quite a few extra bells and whistles that you don't get on the PlayStation. I still think if you take a third-party title that is released on both systems, it seems to me that the Xbox does a much poorer job. And even on FIFA, I noticed some slowdown. And bearing in mind, I've played the demo of the game on the PlayStation with no slowdown whatsoever. And the last thing that I will say slightly negatively about the Xbox, the fucking loading times. Jesus Christ. Every game, it seems, takes an absolute age to load. It's quite fucking mind-numbing. Obviously, I'm on a standard PlayStation normally, so, you know, I'm not expecting, like, nippy loading times like a Pro or whatever. But I know a friend of the podcast, Dan, he's got a PS4 Pro. He picked up an Xbox in the sales as well, and the comparison between those two is absolutely ridiculous. Some of these games, honestly, like Forza's not too bad, but Quantum Break, Recore, Sunset Overdrive, a lot of the racing stuff, it just seems to take such a long time to load. But probably not a problem on the X, and obviously lots of hard drive options there as well. So I think that'll do us, buddies, for my gigantic Xbox love-in. Hopefully you found that interesting. Obviously most of these games are games that we've never spoken about with any experience of in the past, because we didn't have the option to. I think Ash is probably going to be salivating at this list of games, and he's going to be wanting to get involved as soon as possible. So hopefully these consoles go down low again. What I will say is the subscription options on the Xbox versus the PlayStation makes that console far better value for money, in my opinion. And if you're someone who just dips in and dips out and likes having a sort of library of games that you can just tuck into here and there rather than necessarily going after console-specific stuff, then it has to be the Xbox, really, despite it feeling a little less powerful. It's just better value, I think, for what you get. The fact that PS Now is the rival service of Xbox Game Pass is a joke. That service is double the cost on a monthly basis with less games, and it's just not good enough, really. They need to lower the price desperately. The fact that they haven't suggests to me that they don't really feel the need. They're selling so many consoles, they don't need that service. Perhaps they would rather you just keep buying video games anyway. And the same goes for the backwards compatibility on the Xbox. Although, study that list. If you are taking this plunge, study that list, because it feels brilliant. You see a list of like hundreds of games that are backwards compatible. If you actually go down it, you might find yourself somewhat disappointed. I mean, I've got, I think, 10 games on Xbox on disc still, and 3 of the 10 are backwards compatible. So the others are just fucking ornaments or coasters at this point. But yeah, all in all, there we go, buddies. We will be back next week, or I think we will. I would imagine that Ash will be up and running again. If he isn't, then I'll be back for something shorter and more manageable. But either way, thanks very much for listening. If you've made it this far, this week's I've Made It This Far word is Madagascar. And thanks very much for listening. We will catch you next time. You've been listening to the JfG podcast with Ash and me, Alex. You can find us at www.thejfgpodcast.co.uk, where you'll also find our Discord and Street Beat if you want to get involved with the show. Our Facebook is /the JfG podcast, and our Twitter handle is @the JfG podcast. We're on all those video streaming sites too, buddies, from TubeTube to twitch.tv /the JfG podcast to mixer.com, aka beam.fucking-pro. We've got a PS4 community you can join. Just search the JfG podcast on there. And we're also on Google Plus if that is how you choose to live your life. Thanks so much for listening, buddies. We'll catch you next time.